Forge your inner armor.
If you look back into the history of what we do at Inner Armor and Royer Neuroscience, it's really built on the shoulders of some, amazing people, Pavlov and Selye and Skinner and computer development and EEG technology and all these things kind of merging together in a point in time in the world where we're able to leverage so many things that couldn't be done before. But it's these people that came before us, Hans Selye, who was nominated for the Nobel Prize 17 times and published over 1,600 scientific articles and wrote 40 books. I mean, I'm not even ever going to come close to anything like that, right? When he was in medical school, so probably 19, 20, he was doing rounds with the doctors. They would say, this symptom equals this disease. And then they'd go to the next room. This symptom is this disease. And after a while, Selye would look and say, well, what about the symptoms that all of these people have in common? They're all tired. None of them want to stand. They're all losing weight. They're all kind of down emotionally. There's a commonality among these people. It's kind of like he defined it like the disorder of being sick, that these symptoms aren't just this one thing. And in this lab, his first task was to see if there was some other hormones out there. What he did was he dissected multiple cows and got the ovaries and got the juices out of those and then injected those into rats. And he goes to dissect the rats and he finds a common theme across all of these rats. They all had ulcers, bleeding stomach lining. They all had enlarged adrenal glands. And then their thymus, which has to do with their immune system, was actually smaller than it should be. So then he says, I wonder if I didn't put anything in them, but I just created a different scenario. So he goes up into it's in the winter, goes up into the attic of the building that he's in and puts a few rats up in the attic. Then he puts some at normal temperature, and then he puts some down in the furnace room. So nothing different, except he's just going to change the temperature that they're exposed to. Guess what happens when he goes to dissect the rats? The ones that are up in the cold and the ones that are in the furnace room, ulcers, enlarged adrenal glands, shrunken thymus. The ones where the temperature was kept the same, nothing was wrong with them. Their adrenal glands were normal, no stomach ulcers, thymus. So he starts to do all these different things that are more environmentally, not something going into them, but doing something changes in their environment, and their physiology is changing. And that's when he developed this thing called the general adaptation syndrome. If those adrenal glands keep giving out adrenaline and the body keeps reacting to that, there's 4 primary things that are going to happen from that exhaustion phase over time. And those are defined in a category of what we would call metabolic syndrome. The first one of those is because of that demand happens around the adrenal glands, which is, lower in our gut. Our body thinks it needs to go into the storage capacity to deal with the adrenals are asking or putting out all this adrenaline, which then activates the body to want to absorb more sugar. So we want to absorb huge amounts of sugar during this resistance phase. It's a natural piece because of the adrenaline's being released. The adrenaline's being released, so the cells will change their structure and absorb more sugar. So what do? We start to store more fat around where the adrenal glands are, which creates the belly fat that we see. First, you have obesity. And then the second thing is cardiovascular disease gets increased significantly by being stuck in the resistance phase. If you're stuck in sympathetic and the heart is working double time and your diet is changing in a way that's not healthy, that all of a sudden your cardiovascular system gets super compromised. So the second factor of the metabolic syndrome that comes from this resistance phase is cardiovascular disease. A third one that comes from this is memory disorders like dementia and Alzheimer's because of what's going on with some of the sugar load. And then the fourth one, if my adrenal glands they're releasing too much adrenaline, which the number one component of that adrenaline is to cause me to absorb too much sugar. And I've got this massive demand for sugar. What would be the disorder that's likely to develop in the body? Diabetes. Type 2 diabetes. There are estimates that if we stay on the rate that we're at, in the next 20 years, the diabetes will literally bankrupt our entire system because we're growing so fast in type 2 diabetes. But one of the huge components of the development of that is this resistance phase, this metabolic syndrome that Selye kind of led us into when he started to see that stress can literally affect physiological. So all these things I've just talked about, cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, dementia, all brought on by external. This wasn't some virus I got, right? This wasn't, a bacteria or, something I bumped into that caused that. This was something external stressor that caused that.